It's Josh Harima here with Radiant Reflections, episode 6. I'm going to stop having to do my fingers because I'm going to run out of fingers before we run out of episodes. So episode 6 of Radiant Reflections here with my buddy Pastor Ryan. How you doing this morning, Ryan?
Doing well.
Just before, in case I forget to say it at the end, we would love it if you would rate, review, subscribe, whatever platform you're on for listening or watching to this podcast. Go ahead and engage with us that way. We would love some feedback from you, just different ideas that you have. If you have questions, just go ahead and throw that out there. But episode 6, we just had our 4th episode, the last episode in our At the Movies teaching series, and Ryan looked at the movie Breakthrough. But before we get to that, yesterday was Mother's Day, Ryan.
Yes, it was.
So do you want to do a little podcast shout out to your mom or your mother-in-law or anybody?
I feel like I have to now.
You kind of do.
Right? I can't do this now.
I can't put that to you. Then you're like, nah.
Right. No, I'm good. Thanks. Next question. No, yeah. My mom's been awesome. She's always there. She's been an individual that has always served us extremely well. Grateful, thankful for my mom and my mother-in-law who serves our family well. It's just women are a blessing. They're an extreme blessing, and I think it's more interesting being a guy trying to understand a mom. And so, yeah, we're super grateful for my mom, my mother-in-law. Probably, honestly, we don't say thank you enough to our moms out there. Enough. They do a lot of stuff. And just even thinking about my own wife and what she does in the home, I probably take it a little bit for granted, and probably so do my kids, right? They just may not understand yet. But, yeah, shout out to my mom, my mother-in-law, all moms out there that celebrated this past weekend. Job well done. Keep it up.
Yeah, moms, you guys rock. And if you're out there and you have a mom or you know a mom and you think there's any possibility that you take that woman for granted, go and give her a hug or a high five or a $50 bill, something, just to say thanks, Mom. But there you go.
$50 bill.
$50 bill.
Right.
I don't know if I was a mom and somebody just gave me like a $50 bill, I'd be down with that. I don't know. Well, so anyways, episode 4 of At the Movies. We looked at the movie Breakthrough. And now, Ryan, in this movie, it kind of has a little bit, and if you've not seen it, sorry, this will be a little bit of a spoiler, but you've got this kid that falls through the ice. So connected to that, this is not a super serious question. Would you go out on a frozen body of water?
So in the movie Breakthrough, he was 14 years old with his buddies, 14 or 15. And at that age, yes. Now, no. I'm a wimp. Like, I get scared with those things.
Wise.
I'm not going to go out there.
Wise is the word, not wimp. Wise.
Both. Wise and wimp. Like, no, I'm not. Especially deep. Like, not. Here's this scary thing. I don't know. I'm scared of deep waters because I don't know what's underneath me. That kind of freaks me out a little bit. So I'll go on maybe some ice that I know, like, if I fall, I'm only a foot deep or something like that. But I'm not going to go out on ice not knowing. Way out there, not knowing. No, I'm scared.
Dude, it blows my mind. In the winter, like here where we live, here in Sturgis, Michigan, there are a bunch of little lakes all around, and there's a lake nearby, and in the winter, there are people that drive their trucks across the frozen lake, and that blows my mind.
That is honestly, that is super scary to me.
Like, I won't walk on it, let alone drive like a multi-thousand-pound
right.
Hunk of metal.
But as a 14, 15-year-old middle school boy, you're totally going on that water.
See, I probably wouldn't have, because I was a wimp even as a middle school boy.
Like, you're still a wimp today. I haven't gone past it.
I don't like water, and I don't like the cold. So drowning to death in freezing cold water would be probably the worst way to go. Unless there were sharks. Then you're like drowning while being eaten by sharks in freezing cold water. That would probably be the
That is why
worst.
We live near fresh water and not salt
Yes.
water.
There you go.
We don't have to worry about sharks.
So also it's May, so don't go out on any lakes that look frozen right now. Just public service announcement. Anyways, in this movie, I'm derailing us all over the place. In this movie, give us a little bit of sense of what happens in this movie? Obviously, it has something to do with ice, right? We hit on that. But what happens in this movie?
So this movie is based on a real life story that happened in 2015, and a guy by the name of John Smith. And like I said in my message, I didn't make that name up. Like you feel like that's a made name. No, his name was literally John Smith. He was adopted by the Smith family. He was out on ice with his group of buddies. They loved basketball, but they're just messing around. They went on the ice just to take a little picture. And unfortunately, as soon as the picture was kind of snapped and they went and checked it out, the ice broke underneath them. And the 3 middle school boys fell through the ice. And 2 were able to escape and get out of the freezing cold water, while one boy by the name of John Smith did not. And he ended up sinking to the bottom of the lake there. And rescue divers came. For 15 minutes, he was underneath the water. They finally pulled him up, could not resuscitate him. He had no breathing. They brought him to the hospital, no brain activity, blood in his lungs. He was pronounced dead at the hospital there. And mom came in, Joyce Smith came in, kind of in a sense to say goodbye to her boy in the ER. And she just prayed. She had incredible faith that, you know, with man, things may be impossible, but with God, all things are possible. And she poured her grief and her heart out to God in that ER room. And all of a sudden, you know, the medical staff's out in the hall. They can, you know, hear mom crying, grieving, praying out loud. And, you know, their monitors, all of a sudden, it's a beep, beep, and pulse. And they're like, what? Come back. And he's got a pulse, and they were able to bring him back to life, resuscitate him to normalcy, if you will. And yeah, the mom just prayed a deep prayer. And I loved what the doctor of the ER said at the time. He said, patient died, mother prayed, patient came back to life. And that was the story. The whole story was just living this idea of your faith out in the midst of hard times and difficult times, and being a person of prayer, believing in the power of prayer. And he came back to life. And it was just an incredible, real life miracle that happened 5 years ago in the United States.
Yeah, so now in this message, you know, Ryan, you referenced Luke chapter 7, right? And this is also a kind of a similar narrative. Unpack Luke 7 for us here a little bit.
So in Luke 7, we're given a story of Jesus has this large crowd following him. You know, they're super excited because this is Jesus. They're seeing him bring life and vitality to people. They're seeing his teachings. They're super excited about who he is, and they're making this way. And they enter a city called Nain. And in Nain, Jesus and his large crowd encounter another crowd, but this crowd is led by a mother who is devastated and heartbroken, and she is leading a funeral procession because her son has just died. We're not given the reason why her son died. You know, was it a childhood illness? Was it a tragic accident? We have no idea how, but we're given a little glimpse into that story of that. This mom is leading the funeral session, heartache, devastation. There's weeping, there's mourning going on. And not only did she lose, we're told, her only son, but we're also told she's a widow. So she has gone through devastation before. She's lost her husband. Now she's leading this funeral procession to go bury her son. And Jesus and his crowd kind of intersect with this funeral procession. And Jesus performs a miracle right then and there. He sees the woman, and he has compassion for this mother, and heals the boy, and he came back to life. And yeah, it's just... I can't imagine what it would be like to be there, to be in the funeral procession and have this just mourning and weeping and heartache, and just have it flipped like that to an excitement, exuberation, like, whoa, this Jesus, amazing.
So now in Luke 7, we don't really get a great picture of this mom. Right? We don't know if this mom had, you know, boatloads of faith. Right. But in Breakthrough, you talk about this mom and how she has super strong faith. Even, you know, you referenced the fact that, you know, this John Smith's dad, he kind of like, I don't. Hey, if John Smith's dad is out there and he ever hears it, like I'm not trying to like pick on you, right? I mean, again, this is as based on how it's portrayed in the movie, right? Like, I mean, he kind of flakes off a little bit, right? But the mom is like, nope. Hey, I'm gonna stick with it, and out of that, you see John Smith come back to life. What impact does our faith have on others? I mean, it plays out in an obvious way in this movie, right? We would say, well, hey, this mom, Joyce, had faith, and that is connected to the fact that her son came back to life.
Right.
But what are some other ways that our faith impacts other people?
Well, I think, especially in the movie, again, based on a real life, true life story, you get to the end of the movie and you realize that even Joyce Smith, the mother, her faith had impact on her husband, where her husband was understanding. I think the way it was portrayed, her husband is beginning to understand this faith idea. Her husband's understanding, what does it really look like to put Jesus first? What does it really look like to pray these things? And we don't know the impact that Joyce Smith had while she's in that ER room praying over her son, that the doctors and the nurses hear. We have no idea the impact. We don't know the seeds that were planted in there, but we do know our faith impacts people. And I think it's a little mysterious. We don't know exactly sometimes how our faith impacts people. I was brought to a story in Mark, and this is one of my absolute favorite stories, and I think this will kind of help answer the question about faith and understanding things. I think it's in Mark, maybe not, but the paralytic, where Jesus, the three friends are bringing the paralytic, their friend to Jesus. Jesus is in a home. They can't get it. The home's packed, right? And what do the friends do? The friends in the middle of it start to rip the roof off to lower their friend down to Jesus. They have to get their friend to Jesus. That's their idea. And here it is, Mark chapter 2. I love this. Mark chapter 2, verse 5. Watch this. So the paralytic finally got down to Jesus, and Jesus is in the room. He's probably looking up and sees his friends have lowered this guy. I just wonder what Jesus is going through. What's in his head? Like, man, this is great. Or is he like, what are you guys doing? Like,
right. Imagine you're at home having dinner, and like your roof starts to fall in, and somebody starts lowering down. That'd be a little bit.
Yeah. Like, too, also when they're ripping this roof off, like debris is falling. Like you wonder if Jesus is, I'm trying to teach. Like what's happening up there? Like did he pause? Is he just pushing through? What's happening? But here's something interesting. Like it just jumped off the page to me even this morning. Mark chapter 2, verse 5, it says, seeing their faith, the faith of the friends. Jesus, seeing their faith, Jesus looked and told the paralytic, son, your sins are forgiven. Now, he did not say he saw the faith of the paralytic. He said, I saw the faith of the friends, so son, your sins are forgiven. That's mysterious to me. How can the faith of the friends have Jesus to look on the paralytic and says, son, your sins are forgiven? The paralytic never said, and to our knowledge, never said anything. But Jesus saw the faith of the friends and says to the paralytic, you're forgiven. So our faith can have an impact on people, but in a very mysterious way, sometimes that we don't understand. Like that story right there.
And really, if you think about it, right, in this movie in Breakthrough, right, John Smith, it wasn't because of his faith, he was dead.
Right.
Yep. So he wasn't really factored into this. So yeah, it was the faith of his mother on behalf. So that's great.
But our faith can have impact. I mean, I'm sitting here in my role because of the faith of my parents. The generational impact that it's had on my life. I mean, I don't know if I'm sitting here in this role if my parents didn't have faith and weren't believers. I don't know. I mean, I would want to hope that the Lord grabbed a hold of my heart somewhere along the lines, right? And I turned around, but I know I'm here because I grew up in a Christian family with a praying mom and dad that always brought me to church and everything, and I grew up that way. But I'm in my role because of the faith of my parents also.
Right. No, I have So I have two grandparents that are living still, and they're in their 80s, and every day they pray for every one of their children, every one of their grandchildren, every one of their great-grandchildren by name. Every day they do this. And they've done this for, to the best of my knowledge, as long as I've been alive. So yeah, I mean, that family,
And that's
in a sense,
so-
family legacy.
What you said is so cool because of grandparents doing that. My grandma, my dad's mom passed away, maybe 8 years ago, 8 years ago, somewhere there. And I remember before she passed away, she had told me she would send my family cards, birthday cards here and there or whatever. And in her last birthday card she sent to me, she says, Ryan, I pray for you and your family by name every single day. And so seeing that faith too is it's a generation. So yeah, I think we can see faith being played out, the impact on people through generations. But I also think faith acts, there's a mysterious way faith impacts people that we don't fully understand as well.
So, which kind of leads to another question, because I'd want to unpack just for a few minutes this idea of faith, because really faith is kind of an ambiguous term. It's like, well, sometimes people will say things like, well, you just have to have faith. You just have to have faith. And it can seem like it's kind of, well, hey, I have no other way to explain this. You just have to have faith. And I'll be honest, sometimes people use it, and this is super frustrating to me. Sometimes people use it within church world as kind of a cop-out. Rather than engaging in an intellectual discussion about a subject, right? Like, well, hey, I just have faith. I just have faith. You just have to have faith. What is faith? Is that kind of an accurate representation of like, oh, well, hey, if I don't understand this certain thing, I just have faith? Can that be a cop-out sometimes? Help us kind of really understand what faith is.
So I'm going to throw it back on you. What is faith?
So now the biblical thing that we have is it Hebrews? Hebrews, he talks about faith as being sure of what we hope for, certain things we have not seen. But yet at the same time, again, so as far as people using it as a cop-out, do you think that our faith is totally blind? Or do you think so take the resurrection of Jesus, right?
Yep.
Which is arguably the foundation of Christian faith.
Yep.
Right? If Jesus never rose from the dead,
Right.
we're wasting our time. I mean, and Paul talks about this,
Yeah.
right? He says, dude, we should, if Jesus didn't come back from the dead,
What's the point?
what's the point? Right? So, I mean, you take something like that, and you would have people that say, well, no, hey, that's not possible. That's a whole bunch of garbage. And if we just respond, oh, well, I just have faith, is that some blind faith? Just, nope, I just believe this. I just believe this. I just believe this. Or is it a faith based on something? I don't know if any of this makes sense.
No, it does. It's just there's so much here, right? And if faith, I read this morning by one of the pastors that I really look up to and respect. And he was joking around talking about faith, but the idea is he's like, I've heard faith be defined in so many different ways. Everyone defines faith this way, that way. And he's like, here's one of my favorites, actually. It's putting God in front of your next step. And, or it's putting God before your circumstances. And I was just like, man, there's so many people define faith in so many ways. And I think it's okay. I think we can use faith as a cop-out sometimes, right? Oh, you just have to have faith. Well, I do, but at the same time, I wrestle with something, right? I'm going to go back into a story. Mark chapter 9. This is where faith is very interesting, I think. Mark chapter 9, we're told that this guy, this father, has a son that has, his son's demon-possessed. And this father had gone up to some of the disciples of Jesus, and they could not drive out the demon from the boy. So the father finds Jesus, says, hey, I went to your disciples, they couldn't do it. And Jesus says, okay, how long has this been happening to him? In Mark chapter 9, we're told the father says this, from childhood, he said, and many times it has thrown him into the fire or water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. And Jesus said to him, if you can, everything is possible for the one who believes. And immediately the father of the boy cried out. And here it is, cried out. This is what he said to Jesus. I do believe, help my unbelief. So there's like a paradox there that I have belief, but there's some unbelief here. Because a lot of people think that the opposite of faith is unbelief. I don't know if the opposite of faith is unbelief. I don't know what the opposite of faith is, actually. I wonder sometimes if the opposite of faith isn't familiar. We get so caught up in the familiar and it's comfortable that it doesn't ever stretch me. I'm so comfortable with the next step, I don't know if I even need God because it's familiar. And so here I wrestle, and I highlighted in my Bible, I underlined it, I do believe, help my unbelief. I'm going to bring a very personal situation in. I prayed for someone on the phone, and this individual had a family member that was given a diagnosis like, hey, this cancer way past stage. You only have pretty much months to live. And so I believe God can do miracles. I've seen and witnessed God do miracles. I have faith that God can do miracles. But at the same time, when I realized that I prayed for this individual, I walked away knowing I did not pray for a miracle. Because I was trusting the doctor's report that actually this person will be gone. So I walked away sitting there wrestling with what this father wrestled with. I do believe, help my unbelief. And I actually got done off the phone, wrestled with God saying, why didn't I pray for God for you to do a miraculous healing in this person? Was it because was it because I've already believed the death sentence from the doctor? Because instead what I prayed is I prayed for the peace. I prayed for God's presence would just overwhelm this person during maybe the final months of their life. That's what I prayed for. But I walked away wrestling in my own heart. Ryan, why did you not pray for a miracle? Because you believe it. You believe it can happen. But why did you not in that moment?
So, do you think that we do that sometimes? Because, one of the things that grows our faith, right, is when we see prayers answered. Right. So let's say I pray for Timmy, and Timmy has some terrible disease, and I pray for Timmy. I'm like, Lord, heal Timmy, and that happens. That can really grow my faith because it's like, whoa, like God showed up in a huge way. Do you think sometimes we play it safe because we are scared that if it doesn't happen the way we pray for, it will shrink our faith?
Yes. And yes, I do think that. I think some people wrestle with that it will, if I pray for this and it doesn't happen, my faith will shrink. Yes. I've realized what I think the Lord revealed to me in that situation is it wasn't my faith per se that was wrecked in my prayer or that was challenged, is I felt like I had to have God's back. And God, if you did not do this, what effect on the faith of the person I'm praying with will it have? So almost in a sense of I had to protect you, God, and that's not my right?
But hey, real quick, I want to jump in because you actually see that in the Old Testament. I believe it's Moses on a couple of times, right? He actually takes kind of that role. And I'm not saying that you have to be Moses, but he says, hey, Lord, if you do this thing that you just told me that you want to do, what are the people going to say about you?
Yeah.
I mean, so that's not without precedent, I don't think.
Yeah. And that's what I felt like. I felt like I was trying to, protect almost in a sense of maybe perhaps a fragile person that if my pastor's praying this and it doesn't happen, what kind of God is this? And so, I wrestle with it. I wrestle with faith and unbelief and what do we believe about miracles and things like that. But I said it in my message. Listen, what I realized too walking away is, and I said it in my message on Sunday, is God does miracles. And just because God chooses to take this individual in 3 weeks from now because of the cancer, God has still done a miracle in that person's body and they're healed now. And I have to be okay with that. And it's a wrestling of my own faith, of what do I believe? And understanding that, man, if my next steps doesn't require some incredible intervention by God, I think I may have small faith. But I always want to have big faith. I always want to believe in big things because we serve a big God. And so, yeah, I mean, man, wrestle, faith, unbelief, doubt, questions, like it's all okay. And I think God can take all of that. And it's hard to have that nailed down answer sometimes in our faith. Sometimes we just don't know, but we call it a leap of faith. I'm just going to go out on a limb. I heard an analogy of faith. Faith is climbing to a tree, getting out to the edge of a limb and cutting the limb off, but watching the tree fall. Like, I was like, that is like,
that'll mess with your mind.
let that just sit for a minute. Like, I was like, that's a great analogy. That's